Have you ever felt watched in a place where no one else should be? A room meant to hold silence yet filled with something ancient. I never believed in curses or haunted relics. I was a practical woman. Still am, but I've been carrying this inside me for 8 months, and every night since, I've woken up at exactly 3:13 a.m., drenched in sweat because that's the time it all began. My name is Clara Morrell. I'm 33, and before all this, I'd spent nearly a decade working in private security, mostly uneventful gigs, office parks, warehouses, even one ritzy private school. I prided myself on my composure, my professionalism. I'd never once broken protocol, never let fear dictate my response to anything. That changed the night I accepted a job as a night security guard at the Greystone Antiquities Museum. It was supposed to be simple, just a temporary overnight position, until their usual guy recovered from surgery. A 1-week contract, one paycheck, one building. This was supposed to be my first shift. What no one told me was, I wasn't alone in there. The museum may have needed a guard, but it already had a protector, one that didn't like to be watched, one that didn't sleep. The Greystone Antiquities Museum sat at the edge of the old quarter, nestled between crumbling stone buildings and crooked gas lamps that hadn't worked in years. The kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. But once you noticed it, really noticed it, it felt like it had always been there, waiting. The building itself was once a 19th century sanitarium, repurposed after a fire gutted the West Wing sometime in the 40s. They never rebuilt that part, just bricked it off. Now the museum only operated out of the east and central wings, but even then the structure groaned like it resented the change. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. It was like stepping into a pressure pocket. The air felt thick, stale, like dust clung to the walls no matter how often the place was cleaned, and the floorboards whispered beneath every step even when no one walked them. I met two people that first night. Gerald, the day guard I was replacing, didn't say much, just handed me the keys with a grip that lingered too long and eyes that refused to meet mine. "Stick to the main exhibit hall and don't go near the west stairwell," he said. "And whatever you do, don't check the basement at night." Then there was Lenore. She was in charge of night operations and supposedly handled the alarms remotely. She was cordial, efficient, but her words felt rehearsed, like she was reading from a script. She avoided small talk and left almost immediately after giving me a rundown of the monitors. "Everything you need is in the office," she said. "Just don't overreact to things you might hear. The building settles. The artifacts can set off false alerts sometimes. Stay put and you'll be fine." That room, the one they bricked off, I saw it on the blueprint they left in the desk. Ward 3C, no exhibits listed, no access code, just a thick, dark block with a note, UNIM. Do not enter. They never mentioned it out loud, but I already knew that whatever it wasn't empty. The first few hours passed without incident. I sat at the desk, cycling through the camera feeds, hallways full of shadowed glass cases, sculptures half-lit by flickering exit signs, the occasional creak of wood contracting in the night, the kind of silence you'd expect in a museum. But by midnight, things started bending. At first it was just temperature. I kept a little pocket thermometer on me, habit from an old gig, and I noticed it dropping slowly every time I walked past the exhibit titled Rituals of the Forgotten, a collection of ceremonial masks and death totems from vanished tribes. The thermostat read 72, but my reader said 61. Then 50. I chalked it up to bad insulation. Old buildings were unpredictable, but that didn't explain the bell. It was just after 12 when I heard it, 3 soft rings, distant, metallic, like a handbell being rung in another room. There were no bells in the museum, none that should have made a sound. I checked the cameras. Nothing moved. No triggered motion sensors, just static halls and lifeless glass. At 1:07, the hallway near the west stairwell went completely dark. Not dim, black. The feed fuzzed out for exactly 13 seconds before returning, and when it did, there was a figure, just barely visible in the lower left corner. No face, no feature, just the outline of a person standing still, hands at their sides, head tilted, watching. I blinked, and the feed cut to normal. When I rewound it, the figure was gone. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was pixel interference, maybe my own reflection. But deep down I knew the building was starting to respond to me, or maybe it was warning me, because 15 minutes later, I heard something I'll never forget. The soft, scraping whisper, "Don't open the door." I tried to ignore it. I told myself exhaustion was playing tricks on me, but there's a difference between doubt and denial. And what I felt that night wasn't confusion, it was dread, a deep, marrow-level certainty that something was trying to be heard, or kept quiet. At 2:10 a.m., I started digging. There was a small filing cabinet in the security office, supposedly just shift logs, fire drills and inspection reports, but the bottom drawer wasn't locked, and inside, I found something I wasn't supposed to see, a bundle of handwritten notes held together with a rubber band and labeled in faded ink. West Wing activity. They weren't official report, these were journal entries, notes from guards before me, dozens of them, each page a quiet confession. Bell rang again. No source found. Cameras looped at 3:13 a.m. Saw someone in the stairwell, but motion sensors clear, requesting reassignment. I won't go near the ward again. One note chilled me completely. It was dated March 14th. The handwriting was jagged. Urgent. Saw a child in the hall. No face, just stood there pointing at the basement. Door was locked. Still heard it open. I started asking questions the next night. I called Gerald, the day guard, under the pretense of clarifying handover procedure. He didn't answer, but I got a text an hour later. "Don't contact me again. Forget what you saw." Lenore stopped returning calls after that. Her office voicemail was replaced with a generic system message. I checked the digital logs. There was a file labeled Zone 3C, temperature monitor, inactive. But when I clicked it, a live graph opened. It wasn't inactive at all. It was running in real time, and every night at exactly 3:13 a.m., the temperature inside Ward 3C dropped to no matter the season, no explanation. It was then I realized. The museum wasn't malfunctioning, it was remembering. On the fourth night, things changed. I wasn't just witnessing disturbances, I was becoming part of them. At 2:50, the lights in the main hall dimmed to half their usual brightness, and wouldn't respond to manual override. Then the eastern wing camera, which had been static all week, suddenly flickered back to life. That wing had been under renovation for months. No one was supposed to be there, no power, no maintenance scheduled. But the feed showed movement. A slow sweep of something passing across the far end of the room, not walking, gliding. The movement was too fluid, too deliberate, like it wasn't bound by gravity. The security system flagged it as unidentifiable motion event. I saved the clip, but when I tried to replay it, the file was corrupted. That same hour I heard the bell again, only this time, it wasn't faint. It was loud directly outside the security office. 3 short chimes, followed by silence, so dense it felt manufactured. I opened the door expecting nothing, but in the hall someone had placed a single, old-fashioned key on the floor, blackened with age, curved teeth. A label was attached with brittle string. 3C. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I knew better than to use, but the pull, that tug in my gut, it felt like gravity, like I was being invited, or tested. I made it as far as the west stairwell before I stopped myself. The door to the bricked-off section, the one marked Ward 3C, no access, was visible now in the faint red wash of the emergency light. And it was open. Not wide, just a few inches, just enough. That door hadn't been open in decades. According to the logs, it didn't even have an internal mechanism anymore. And yet, there it was. Inviting. I stepped closer. The air was ice, not cold, dead, as if something on the other side had devoured every bit of warmth. Then I heard a voice, low and ragged, from just beyond the door. "She's still down here." I don't know why I stepped through that door. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to call someone, anyone, but something deeper, a voice I didn't recognize as my own, told me this wasn't just a haunting, it was a conversation. And the building was finally answering back. The corridor behind the door wasn't part of the museum map. It sloped downward. Old brick walls wet with condensation. The floor slick like something had been leaking for a long, long time. No light, just my flashlight. And even that felt dimmer than it should have been. The hallway ended at a rusted metal door marked simply with a faded number 13. I reached for the knob, and as my fingers touched it, I felt something move. Not physically, but inside me. A wave of nausea surged through my stomach, followed by a cold so deep it made my teeth ache. But I pushed it open. The room was pitch black. I stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind me. I spun around. Nothing, just blackness. Then my flashlight flickered. And that's when I saw her, in the far corner of the room. Knees drawn to her chest. Face hidden beneath long soaking hair. A girl no older than 12. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just sat there like she'd been waiting for years. "Hey," I whispered, barely audible over the blood pounding in my ears. "Are you okay?" She lifted her head. Her face was wrong. Too still. Eyes completely black. Not just dark. Absent. Empty holes that reflected nothing. She opened her mouth slowly. And what came out wasn't a scream. It was a sound like stone grinding against bone. I ran. I don't even remember how I found the stairs again. I just remember the cold chasing me up that corridor. The shadows stretching toward me like fingers. I slammed the west stairwell door behind me and collapsed against it, gasping, shaking so hard I couldn't get the key back into my pocket. The office door was wide open when I got back. The monitors were all dark, every single feed offline, except one. Camera 13, Ward 3C, still running, still showing the girl in the corner. Only now, she was standing. I didn't sleep the next day. I couldn't. I went home, locked every door and sat with my back to the wall, replaying that flickering image over and over in my head. The girl, the door, the sound, and that name. She's still down here. Who was she? I went back to the museum that evening just before dusk. I told myself I was there to finish the shift, to not let fear define me. But the truth was, I needed answers. I couldn't keep walking into the dark blind. The museum's administration office had been empty for years. Most records had been digitized or thrown out, but not all. In a locked drawer behind the old front desk, I found a file marked Sanitarium Archives, Closed Wards. Dust covered the folders inside. Pages yellowed, brittle. That's where I found her name. Margaret E. Collins, age 12. Admitted 1931. Diagnosis: catatonic schizophrenia, compulsive mutism. Incident: see File 13A. The language was cold, detached, but the details were horrifying. Patient found unresponsive in Ward 3C. After incident involving staff member. Records indicate extreme psychological distress following repeated exposure to solitary confinement. Behavior described as unmanageable but observant. Final entry dated October 17, 1932. Patient has not spoken or moved in 94 days. Refuses food. Refuses light. When questioned, only repeats the phrase, "He lives in the floor." There were no further notes. No record of discharge. No mention of death. Just a final stamp on the file. Confidential, do not transfer. I looked at the map again. The original blueprint. Ward 3C had never been demolished. Just sealed. Buried. She wasn't a ghost in the way we think of ghosts. She was entombed in memory, preserved like an insect in amber. And the museum didn't protect her. It imprisoned her. And now it wanted someone to witness what it had done. That night, the museum felt wrong in a new way. The lights still functioned. The air still hummed with the usual electric current. But the building had taken on a rhythm like breathing. The floors pulsed subtly beneath my feet. The walls ticked, softly like fingernails against plaster, and the shadows no longer waited for darkness. They moved, even under fluorescent light. At exactly 2:37 a.m., the alarm on my desk triggered Zone Storage 6 on a tortoiside entry. I opened the feed. It was the girl again. She stood in front of a display case, one I had walked past 100 times before, housing a series of bronze death masks, recovered from a forgotten European monastery. Her head tilted to the side, her hair soaked, dripping onto the marble. As I watched, she raised her hand and pointed not at the mask, but at the security camera itself. The screen went black. Every monitor shut off at once, and then the pounding began. It started faintly like someone knocking on a far-off door, but it grew louder, closer, like it was inside the walls, inside the vents. Each knock matched my heartbeat, slamming harder, faster. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the hall. Every exhibit light was now pulsing in a slow, synchronized rhythm. On, off, on. In that flickering corridor, I saw the faces pressed against the glass of the display cases. Not reflections. People, hundreds of them. All shapes, all sizes. Mouths open wide in silent screams. Eyes rolled back, hands flat on the interior glass. And all of them were facing me. I stumbled backward, crashing into a pedestal. A statue toppled, shattered, ceramic shards biting into my leg. But I barely felt it, because from down the corridor, through the shuddering pulse of lights and glass and breathless silence, I heard her again. Margaret. He's awake now. I knew then this wasn't just about Margaret. There was something older, something that used the girl, or maybe fed on her sorrow, a presence that had been part of the building long before it became a museum, before it wore this respectable facade. I went back to the archives one last time. The public records were thick. Sanitarium closures, a fire in 1942, vague reports of malpractice, but in the restricted drawer beneath the office file cabinet, tucked behind dusty blueprints, I found a different folder. It had no name, just the symbol that was etched into the entrance to Ward 3C, a circle bisected by a vertical line, flanked by two small crescent moons. Inside were photocopies of maintenance logs and audio transcripts, all from 1940 to 1943. Ensure the Guardian's door remains sealed. Staff must not refer to it directly in the patient wings. The girl is the conduit. If she continues to resist, the entity will attempt reassignment. One transcript chilled me to the bone. It was a nurse's confession, written just before her resignation. It's not a haunting. It's a trade. The building offers safety, quiet, prestige, but it demands a ward, a watcher. Margaret didn't die. She changed. She became part of the contract. The Guardian isn't the threat. The Guardian is the lock, and she is its key. That's why the museum had alarms that couldn't be disabled. Why the basement had sensors labeled inactive but weren't. Why the staff refused to speak above whispers about Zone 3C. They weren't trying to guard the building from intruders. They were trying to keep something in. And now it wanted out. And I had the key. I don't remember deciding to go back down there. It was like my body moved on its own, guided by something deeper than thought. Like gravity pulling me to a place I never should have escaped from the first time. The key, blackened and cold as ice, felt heavier in my pocket than before. When I gripped it, it felt warm as if it had a pulse of its own. I waited until 3:13 a.m., the exact time the alarms always spiked. The cameras always glitched. The temperature always dropped. That was when the museum was weakest. Or maybe when it was most awake. I descended the west stairwell alone, each step echoing with a delay that felt wrong, like the walls were deciding whether to absorb the sound or let it return. The door to Ward 3C was closed again, sealed with a fresh bolt, but the key fit. The lock clicked open with a sound like bone cracking. Inside, the corridor was darker than before. The shadows didn't move. They watched. The air was thick, pulsing, like lungs drawing breath through the stone. At the end of the hall, the door marked 13 stood open. No hesitation this time. The girl was waiting, but not sitting. She stood at the center of the room, hands folded, hair no longer soaked, but now flowing gently around her as if underwater. She looked older, not in age but in presence, timeless, as if she'd aged 100 years inside a child's frame. "I was the lock," she whispered. "I kept him dreaming." I opened my mouth but no words came. Behind her the wall shuddered. Cracks spread across it like veins. A low groan came from deep below, a sound that vibrated in my bones. She looked at me with those hollow, infinite eyes. They forgot. They left. But the museum never did. It remembers its bargain. Then she stepped aside, and the wall began to bleed. Dark, oozing liquid spilled from the cracks. And something moved behind it. Huge, shifting, breathing. I ran, up the corridor, through the stairwell, back into the lightless hallways. The pounding returned. Not from the walls this time, but from below. The building shook, lights shattered. Alarms howled like screams. When I slammed the security office door behind me, the monitors blinked on all at once. Every camera showed one thing: Room 13, and a door behind the girl swinging wide. I should have left. I should have walked out that night, and never looked back. But when I tried to open the front doors, the locks wouldn't budge. The keycards were dead. My phone had no signal. And outside, through the glass, the world looked wrong. Like a painting of itself, flat, unmoving. The museum had sealed itself, not to keep something in, but to keep me in. The office lights blinked out. Only the monitors remained lit, casting a pale, flickering glow across the room. One by one, the camera feeds shifted, showing images that couldn't be real. In Gallery 4, the ancient Greek statues had all turned to face the lens. Their mouths were open wide, in silent screams. In the Egyptian wing, the mummy's wrappings had unraveled, slithering across the floor like serpents, coiling toward the walls. In the west corridor, the girl was walking, but it wasn't Margaret anymore. Her form flickered with every step, tall, thin, then hunched, then something crawling on all fours, like the museum was testing shapes, searching for a form that frightened me most. I heard glass shatter. Something was in the hallway. I locked the office door, shoved the filing cabinet in front of it. My breath was shallow, rapid, every muscle frozen with cold terror. On the monitor, the girl stopped at the last camera. She looked directly into it, and then every screen went black. A single message flashed: "The Guardian has failed." I screamed, loud, raw, not from pain, but from knowing. I wasn't the guard anymore. I was the replacement. The moment those words appeared on the screen, I knew I wasn't just witnessing something ancient. I was becoming part of it. The museum didn't just house artifacts, it collected them. People, memories, sins. It kept what it needed. I shoved open the utility hatch behind the security office. An emergency exit tunnel I had found listed on the blueprint, supposedly sealed. But that night, it wasn't. I descended into the dark. The passage was narrow and smelled like wet earth and rust. Water dripped steadily from unseen pipes. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness. It stuttered like the batteries were dying, even though they were brand new. At the end of the tunnel was a steel maintenance hatch. No lock, just a bar. I lifted it, heart pounding, every instinct screaming that something was behind me. When I opened it, I was outside. But not free. The world was silent. Streets frozen, cars unmoving. The trees didn't sway. It was like the museum had brought its rules with it, infecting the outside through me. Then I heard the bell again. But this time, it wasn't inside the building. It came from behind me, echoing up from the tunnel, a deep, sonorous toll. I turned and saw her. Margaret. She was standing in the hatchway, half in shadow, half in moonlight that didn't seem to reach the ground. Her eyes were not black now but silver, reflective, mirroring me. "You were never here to guard us," she said. "You were here to replace us." She raised her hand. The ground cracked beneath me. A line of frost swept across the pavement, spider webbing outward, freezing the air itself. My legs refused to move, my limbs heavy, like I was being remembered by the building. Absorbed, she stepped forward, and then the door slammed shut. She was gone. The frost stopped, and I was alone. I ran. I didn't look back. I don't remember how I got home. I don't remember the drive, but when I awoke the next morning, the key was gone, and so was the museum. At first I thought I was going mad. I returned to the museum's address 2 days later, desperate to prove it had all happened. To prove to myself that I wasn't unraveling. But where the Greystone Antiquities Museum had stood, there was nothing but a vacant lot, choked with weeds and ringed with rusted fencing. No sign of demolition, no debris, just absence, like the entire building had been lifted away without a trace. I went to city records, library archives, even historical societies. None had any listing for a Greystone museum, not in their databases, not in old newspapers, not even in decades-old registries. It simply didn't exist, except I had photos, screenshots of the security feeds, pictures of the keys, even one blurry image of Margaret, taken on my phone when the monitors glitched. But when I checked the phone, nothing. The files were gone, deleted, and not just gone, corrupted. Every folder from that week read data in inaccessible, unknown file format. I confronted Lenore if that was even her real name, found her listed in an old museum staff directory for a different building across the state. When I showed up, she denied ever knowing me. "I don't work nights," she said, eyes cold. "I never have." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Some places protect themselves," she whispered. "You should be grateful it let you leave." I was stunned. It disappeared. How is that possible? Her smile deepened. "Greystone doesn't disappear. It moved." I left shaken, but the truth settled in like a splinter in my brain. This wasn't about a haunted building. It was about something older, something hidden, a mobile sanctuary for ancient things, forgotten rituals, condemned soul. It finds new homes, settles into old foundations, and waits for the right person to take the key. And me, I wasn't chosen by accident. I was offered. I couldn't live with it. Not knowing, not sleeping, not being sure if the thing that had stared back at me from the monitor was still watching. I needed to stop it. If the museum was some kind of living entity, something that moved, consumed and hid, I figured maybe it left traces, digital footprints, paper shadows, and if I could track it, maybe, just maybe I could close the door for good. I contacted a man named Isaiah, an archivist and fringe historian who specialized in what he called architectural parasites. Buildings that weren't just haunted but alive, locations with patterns of vanishing staff, paperless renovations, inexplicable construction permit. Isaiah didn't laugh when I told him about Greystone. He just asked for coordinates. 2 days later he called me back, his voice hollow. "Clara, the site where you say the museum stood, that lot has had 6 different structures built and removed, since none of them lasted longer than 5 years. But here's the thing, each one had the same structural footprint, same walls, same internal layout." He sent me old diagrams, photos. They all looked familiar. The security office, the west stairwell, even Ward 3C, though it had different names over time, and in every version there was one constant. A room marked 30, always sealed, always forgotten. That night I made a choice. I packed every record I could find, screenshots, notes, diagrams, and mailed it to Isaiah, with one instruction: if I disappear, publish everything, burn it into the ground. Then I drove to the new location, an old historical society building in a forgotten county, recently reopened as an antiquities exhibit. Same banner font, same curator's name, same under restoration sign over the west wing. I walked to the front door, placed the original blackened key on the doorstep and whispered, "No more." And then I poured gasoline across the threshold and lit the match. The flames took quickly, but as the fire rose, I swear to you, the building didn't burn. It didn't crumble. It screamed, like stone begging for mercy, like 1,000 voices crying from behind walls. And when the fire finally collapsed the front entrance, there was no smoke, only cold. The fire didn't make the news. There were no reports of arson, no investigation, no emergency service. When I returned the next morning, expecting charred rubble, the building was still there, untouched, immaculate, worse yet, open. The door was ajar, like it had reset itself, and the key, gone. I checked the local news archives, police logs, county fire department records. Nothing. As if the building had never burned, as if I had imagined the whole thing. But I didn't, because something had changed. That night I dreamt of Margaret, but she wasn't in Ward 3C anymore. She stood at the foot of my bed, her eyes no longer hollow but set, like she was mourning something I couldn't see. She didn't speak, but behind her, the walls of my bedroom were bleeding. Slowly, thick rivulets of black. When I woke up, my window was open. A breeze crept through, cold and bitter, and on the floor beside my bed, where no one could have placed it, was a new key. This one was silver, clean, untarnished. It was engraved, Ward 13, Clara M. I broke down. I've spent my entire life protecting people, watching cameras, guarding doors. But there are doors that don't want guards, only sacrifices. I never wanted to be chosen. I just wanted a paycheck. Now, I carry a lock around my neck, not because I'm trying to keep something out, but because I know, one day soon, I'll have to let it in. I knew I couldn't run, not anymore. The key had followed me. The dreams were growing stronger, no longer just visions, but memories that weren't mine. I'd wake up crying with the taste of dirt in my mouth, the sound of stone dragging across concrete, echoing in my ears. I was remembering her pain, Margaret, or maybe the pain of everyone the building had consumed before her. So I returned, one last time. The museum had relocated again. This time it posed as a traveling relics showcase in a vacant church, leased under an alias that didn't exist before last month. Isaiah helped me find it. He begged me not to go, said I could disappear, go off-grid, start fresh. But you can't run from a place that lives inside you. I arrived just after midnight. No staff, no alarms. The door opened before I touched it. Inside everything was the same. Same layout, same faint scent of old paper and embalmed air. And at the far end of the central hall, behind a velvet rope where no exhibit had ever stood before, was the door, Ward 13, unlabeled, unlocked, waiting. I walked through. This time, the room wasn't empty. The floor was a circle of scorched stone, inscribed with ancient markings, charcoal lines still smoking, and in the center stood a figure cloaked in shadow, taller than human, arms impossibly long. It didn't speak, it didn't move, it just breathed. Behind it, suspended in the air, was Margaret, not a ghost, not a girl, an echo, preserved in sorrow, looping that final moment, over and over, the moment she became the lock. I stepped forward, holding the key. The creature turned to me, head twisting with a sickening snap, and then it knelt. I don't know why. I don't know what power had chosen me, what ancient mechanism had recognized my name, my pain, my burden, but I stepped into the circle, and I took her place. The walls howled, the floor shook, that thing screamed, not in rage, but in release. And then, silence. Margaret opened her eyes, and for the first time she smiled. The room collapsed around me in light, and I fell into darkness.